Yeah, we're getting attendees. They're all coming in.
We're rolling in. Ian, my computer is restarting. That's really unfair. Wow.
This shows that Gail is in.
It is
Yeah.
outside of normal work hours. I'm sorry. Should be quick.
Okay.
We're just waiting for
Well,
everybody to populate into the meeting, so we'll begin in just a minute. And Damien's here. Hi, Damien.
So my computer's restarting. I just need a couple of minutes. I'm on my iPad, but I need my computer in order to get going.
Okay.
Okay, I'll say hi then.
Yeah,
The joys of technology.
yeah. So I know our attendees are listening, but it is the joy of technology.
Yeah.
So
It happens to all of us, Joe. Yesterday at 2 o'clock, my internet just decided it was done for the day and didn't really care about my Zoom meetings.
yep.
So took me an hour and a half to get it back up.
Well, hopefully Ian tells me this will be quick, but it's restarting. So
Yeah.
You don't have to wait for me, Julie. I can do what I need to do, and when it restarts, I'll just jump right in again.
Okay, welcome everybody. Then I'm going to call the workshop to order, and we thank you for being here. I want to let everybody know that the chat box is disabled this evening because we would like you to please use the Q&A, which is the far right-hand little icon that's got the little bubbles around it. We had some confusion in the last meeting where some were using chat, some were using the Q&A. So we're going to streamline it with Q&A and get to all your questions that way. So if you're trying the chat and it's disabled, we're not trying to keep you from bringing your questions up or participating. We just would ask you to please use the Q&A, not the chat. Okay, so with that, I am going to turn our workshop over to Dr. Mocha to do her presentation on the 2020-21 reopening plans.
Thank you. As I said, my computer's coming up, so I'm going to just start with a little bit of a reminder. I know we all know that we're in the midst of a pandemic. I also know that we are anxious about a lot of issues, and that includes everyone. Certainly anxious about the health and wellness of ourselves and our family members. We're anxious about employment. For many folks, employment is a question mark given how schools operate. And we also are aware of the impact of remote instruction on learning and on family life. So with that being said, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. We're going to work to get everybody's questions answered. If not live, certainly after the meeting, we plan to put an FAQ on our website. So there will be opportunities for everyone's questions to be answered. Just going to try and join this workshop from this other computer. There we go. Okay. Sorry, folks, just need a sec.
That's okay. I would speak up and say, you know, Christy, I'm a little bit envious because these school district Lenovo's don't allow us to do the virtual background, which I think all of us would like, but yours is very nice.
Thank you.
Okay, almost there. Okay. At any rate, I do want to thank all the folks who helped put this together because it was a joint effort to get to this place. tonight's agenda is all about our plan to reopen school. Christy, next slide. So we do have an agenda for tonight. We are going to talk about goals. First of all, our mission and values really drive everything we're doing, but we have goals that are specific to opening in a pandemic. So we know that we want every South Whitby student to be a lifelong learner who is multiculturally engaged, literate, and an active community member able to meet the challenges of a global society. Next slide. Our goals in this situation are all about safety, our first priority. So everything that is in this plan is making sure that safety is our goal. We know that face-to-face instruction is the best way for our students to learn. But we're not going to get there until we know that it's safe to do so. So we have metrics to help, and we're going to go with that and the science that goes along with them. Next slide. In addition, we want to make sure that the education we provide is robust, regardless of the modality that we're in. So I want to give you a little context about last spring and what we've learned. So we'll remember that March 13th, we closed to face-to-face instruction. And we were told at that moment that it was for a few weeks and that we were to do no harm and stay connected with our students. And then that changed, and it changed to the rest of the year. And then we were told that we needed a continuous learning 1.0, that we had to change our grading practices, and that we had to feed everyone who needed food. We had to investigate childcare. We had to provide connectivity. So it was a huge lift. And our staff essentially continued to build an airplane that was in the air. So this is a different year. We know what worked. We did a survey of everyone in June. We did another survey recently. We heard from everyone just about what worked well and what needed to be improved. So we are going forward with all of that in mind. We also are continuing to learn about COVID and the impact that has had. So next slide. So what did our staff say to us? So we have about 200 folks. We so far have 116 respondents. Our main question to them, besides all of the input we wanted about what worked well and what didn't work well, and what they really needed training on and so on, is, are you in a high-risk category? Because we need to know that, and we need to work with people who are in a high-risk category. So 52% are not in a high-risk category, 30% are, and 18% have moderate risk. And we asked people what their biggest concerns are, and number one concern is exposure to COVID and getting sick. Next slide. 15% say they're comfortable to return without any concerns. 30% are not comfortable at all, and 40% have concerns but are okay to return. Next slide. So we also talked to parents, and we asked them a series of questions about what went well, what they would like if given the opportunity, and so on. So this is the response. At the elementary level, we're looking at some different models, some outdoor opportunities, and so on. So you can see here the results. We still have 23% that no matter what want distance only. And then the others break out that way. And if we go to the next slide, we can look at 5-6. Becomes pretty similar. We're at about a 25% distance only and 72% traditional and 3% other. And other could be, I'm going to homeschool, or I'm going to do a combination, or so on. And 3% represents, obviously, from that number of respondents, just a few people. Same thing, 7-12. So the learning, the models that people are hoping for are hybrid. So we basically have three opportunities. We're going to do hybrid. Again, we'd love to be full-time face-to-face, but that's in the future. And 100% distance learning. So that 100% distance learning option will be available all year long. So we want to make sure that the folks who are electing to do that have that opportunity. Next slide. So how are we going to make decisions about what we're doing and how we're doing it? So the governor issued not an order. He issued education recommendations based on risk. And this comes from the Department of Health. So low, moderate, and high risk. And the way they determine low risk is per 100,000 people over the course of 2 weeks. If it's less than 25 cases, it's considered low risk. You can do modified in-person learning and some sports. Next level is moderate, which happens to be where we are right now, which is remote learning recommended and some modified in-person learning for younger students. And then of course, high is above 75 per 100,000. So that framework is what we're basing this on, along with continuous discussions with Island County. Next slide. So this is a chart of how it breaks down. It's the same thing that I just said to you, but much more detail in modality and extracurricular and so on. So that'll be available for folks to look at in more detail. Next slide. This is where we are in Island County, and Snohomish County is nearly at 100 cases per 100,000. And as we know, they're close to us. And Whatcom and Skagit are also above the 25. Island County this morning indicated that it's 23.5, but that just came out this morning. So this slide is last updated, as you can see, August 7th. And they based this metric on a variety of things. What I will be getting every week in my email first thing Wednesday morning is the whole picture from Island County as it relates to us, because there are different websites and different reporting and different agencies that put out the information. And so I want to make sure, and all three school districts are doing this on the island, we will get it directly from Island County with the metrics. Next slide. So where are we right now? We are looking to begin August 31st with staff. We will be at level 2, and the staff will be working together on all of these issues of planning and assessment and connecting with every single student, making sure that we're distributing materials, getting ready to provide instruction in whatever mode they are going to be providing it. And for the year, so that they are looking at what the essential learning standards are for the course, that we're actually going to be able to have students demonstrate competency rather than have it all be time-based. So these are the things that we're working on in our planning during that time. Next slide. What we anticipate is that on September 14th, barring any change that goes to an increase in disease, we will then begin bringing students in, and we will start with our kindergarten students as well as our most vulnerable students, those with special needs. Again, those individuals, both the kindergarten students and the students with special needs, will be contacted individually. Plans will be made. Not every student with special needs will return. It'll be based on a variety of factors, but every single family will be contacted and it will be a discussion. Same with kindergarten. Those who wish to return in the hybrid model will be able to. Next slide. From there, we continue up the scale as the disease decreases. So I have a slide that I'll show you about how we will look at level 4 if we move to level 4. And the changes are noted there, that we would increase the opportunity for indoor classes, because by then it will likely be, the weather will be changing. So those outdoor classes won't be able to continue through the winter. We'll consider adding K4 at that point, and potentially 5-12, all in hybrid. In addition, as I said earlier, the remote learning will continue for those who strictly want to be remote all year. To get there, we must be in phase 3, and we need to be moving lower than 25 per 100,000 on a consistent basis. Next slide. It's the same model. Again, we have metrics to move to the next level. At that point, we would be in a full hybrid mode, which is 2 days of in-school instruction, 3 days of remote instruction for students, and that would be K-12. So that is basically getting us to the point where we would just about be ready to go full-time face-to-face. Again, we must be in phase 4 on our dial, and now consistently below 25 per 100,000 to get to phase 5. Next slide. 100% face-to-face is our goal. That is always our goal. We know it's how students learn best, and it's where we want to get to. That would be phase 5, and then no new cases for at least 2 weeks in the county. So that's not a less than 25, that's 0 for at least 2 weeks. Next slide. At any point, based on how the disease behaves, we could drop back to a level 1. If cases move close to 75 per 100,000 in a 2-week period, if there's an outbreak, any of those things, we would be dropping back. Next slide. So how are we going to keep COVID out? And when kids are in school, how are we going to be, when staff or students are in school, how are we going to deal with keeping the disease out? Next slide. So these are no choice issues. Any face-to-face time, whenever staff are on site, everyone must wear a mask at all times. I have an asterisk there because the only time one would not be wearing a mask is if they're in a room alone with the door closed, or they're outside and they're maintaining social distance. Otherwise, they are wearing a mask. Even if they get up to use the restroom and walk in the hall, they're wearing a mask. Must maintain a 6-foot distance from others. No crowding. We don't want any congregation of folks. We're going to maintain hand hygiene, sanitize frequently. We're going to be completing health attestations. More on this to follow, but we have an app for this. So prior to arrival for students and staff, they will be completing the health attestation on the app, and then temperature check prior to entry at the building. And there are logistics around that. And as we begin in a couple of weeks with staff, we will start to see what those logistics look like. And then when students arrive, kindergarten is our first group, we will see what that looks like. As we begin transportation, it will change again. So there's more to this, but we have a plan for it. And we're, to the best of our ability, going to create cohorts so that in the event that there is a disease, we will be able to do contact tracing, which the county will be handling. In some situations, like with our students at the upper levels, there is very little cohort creation possible because students will be moving in the building and so on. So that increases risk. Next slide. What will we do if we do have a case? First thing we do is call the health department. They will be doing the contact tracing and they will guide the individual. We will require, it will be mandatory that we have a 14-day quarantine for all who had contact, and require that the individuals and the group in that cohort follow all health department guidance. The individual that was positive must test negative before returning, minimally 14 days out, and they must follow all health department guidance. So we're working hand in hand with the health department to make sure that if we have disease, that we handle it very, very carefully. Next slide. So the question is, how are you going to make decisions? So again, the recommendation, and by the way, just to be really clear, this is the recommendation for the board that I'm going through. It's really a board decision tonight as to how they want to guide us in our plans. So I'm suggesting that we look at this every 4 weeks. So I'm going to walk through this because as it stands, it may be a little bit confusing. So on October 15th, that will be our first time to look at the conditions and whether or not we need to make a change. We'll be monitoring them weekly, but this will be our first time to be looking at it and saying, okay, are we at 25 cases per 100,000 over a 4-week period? So we're still in a situation where we have 1 week right now where we're seeing it below 25. But we're not even starting school until the 31st. So will it continue a downward trend? We certainly hope so. But we're going to look at it on October 15th and see what the prior 4 weeks look like. Look for no outbreaks in any school during that same 4 weeks. If we meet that, then we'll look at moving toward K-6 and hybrid learning. Families will be contacted with a start date. It won't be October 16th that we begin. We have to look at it and say, okay, here's the start date. Maybe it's 5 days later or whatever, but we'll contact families. And again, those wanting 100% distance learning can continue that. If we don't see that October 15th, then, and we haven't met that criteria, we're going to wait 4 more weeks and reevaluate. So on November 15th, let's assume the positive, we met the conditions on October 15th, and now it's November 15th. We're going to look again. Are we continuing below 25 cases per 100,000 over the prior 4 weeks? Have we had no outbreaks? How has it been now that we have K-6 students in the building? Can we move on to now 7-12? Can they go into rotation? If yes, then again, we contact families, we give them a start date. If we keep going in the positive, which means the disease is reducing, then we look again after winter break. Are we still in that same place? If so, then we transition to larger groups, go full hybrid learning, consider 4 days a week. So after the start of any phase described above, if it begins to creep up, but remains below 35. So again, we're slowly adding students. We're not going to, if we have a week of 35 or 2 weeks of, close to 35, we're not going to retreat completely, but we're monitoring it. If it goes up a lot, let's say it goes up to 60 or 70 or 75, we may transition back. We may reduce the number of kids in school. We may have to regroup and replan. So if there's a COVID case in class, and I already went through this, class moves to 100% distance learning, they quarantine for 2 weeks, they can return to the hybrid model after quarantine as long as the health department is with us on that. If there are 2 or more cases in a school, this whole school moves back to distance learning for 2 weeks. And then, we begin again. So that's the way we've laid out the metrics for decision making. That's our suggestion. Next slide. This is another graph indicating the same thing. that we're going to do daily health assessments. We're going to be monitoring the Island County. We have a plan. If we have positive, we're going to be increased cleaning from our typical situation. And we're going to be preventing by masks and social distancing and hygiene and so on. Next slide. So what will school look like under the remote learning plan? And this is the K-4 plan. More on this when we get to September, but I'm sure folks have questions about, is it going to be all day? How are we going to monitor it? So the state requires us to have a plan that allows the opportunity for student learning full-time. Doesn't mean they're in front of a camera all day at all. We will have live Zoom calls, but we will have asynchronous videos. We will be recording those Zoom calls so that if a family simply can't be working at the same time, we're having a live Zoom call, they can certainly look at the recording. There will be options for students, and teachers will have time to create videos. You can see that at the end of the day, so on and so forth. So next slide. We have plans in place. Again, people will get much more detail as we go forward, but we have a daily schedule and one that allows for families to be either on when it's live or look at it after the fact. We also have some teachers thinking about making time in the evening. So that is yet to be determined. Next slide. Same thing at the 7-8 and the 9-12. So again, you can look at these in much more detail. I just wanted to make sure that you had a sense of, yes, we will have times during the day. Yes, we have a full schedule that allows us to do the required 1,027 hours over the school year and make sure we get in 180 days. Next slide. So some questions that have come up, and I also have some board member questions that I want to get to, but grading, our grading plan is to return to grading in place prior to March 2020. We had changed it based on the state recommendation to A, B incomplete for the upper grades and for a 2 or a 3 in terms of our standards-based grading. We will go back to what it was prior to March. Attendance counts for students. As I described, it will be flexible, and OSPI is still determining the method for collecting that data. We will have a consistent learning management system through Google Classroom. That's not optional. All teachers will be using that, and a consistent daily schedule that has some flexibility in it. We will issue a Chromebook to every single student. We will also have a plan for how students will get their textbooks and any other materials that they need. All students will have connectivity, and we will continue to arrange that through Readiness to Learn. There is some federal funding that came in to OSPI for that, so we are looking at how we can make sure that everyone is connected. At this time, it's anticipated that the assessments will occur. So last year they were waived. It's right now they are they're planned for. And our district funding will be based on enrollment, and enrollment is calculated based on engagement in the prior 30 days. So attendance and enrollment are being worked on to ensure that we get funding based on our enrollment. Some other questions that, that have come up from a board member. I just have to grab them. Information around our proposed numbers and our enrollment. So our kindergarten enrollment's lower than we anticipated by about half. But there's a local private school that is not operating this year, and we have at least 35 new entrants. So we won't really know our enrollment until we begin. So I don't want to give you enrollment numbers, but I'm hoping that that our enrollment is what we had anticipated. Our teachers all have contracts right now. We did hold some positions open, and there will not be any reductions in force for teachers. Question about, are there any Washington schools going against the governor's school closure order? Well, the governor didn't actually order schools to close. As you saw from the presentation, the governor provided metrics for us to use to determine what we're doing for school, and that it's the local school board's decision as to making sure that they look at those metrics, and it's a local decision. We also forwarded to the board information from the risk management pool as well. Many people believe teachers are essential employees and should return to work. So teachers have not stopped working. Teachers have been deemed school employees. They haven't stopped working, and they will be providing instruction. In terms of our classified staff, that's a different matter, because we will not be funded for everything like we were last spring. So we meet with our classified union tomorrow, actually, and they know this, but yes, we anticipate that there will be some reductions, but we don't know what that looks like yet until we get back to school. I provided survey results. Let's see. Transportation, I'm going to ask Dan to speak to the transportation budget. So Dan, if you could jump in here and give an explanation as what happens with transportation and how we're funded and the changes. Is Dan here?
I don't see him.
See him, Joe.
I think we lost him.
Oh, well,
I'm looking.
okay. So his computer restarted. Thank you, Ian. Great timing. Okay, so he'll be back. We'll come back to the transportation piece. With schools closed and parents choosing to homeschool, many taxpayers would like to know how it will affect or reduce taxes. We actually, at this point, are not sure how many will be homeschooling. Just be really clear that school is open and we will be moving forward with instruction. It will look different. We don't have a lot of folks opting to homeschool at this time. So at this point, once Dan gets back, we can talk about the transportation piece, but I'd love to hear the board's questions at this point.
Yeah, Joe. So I think transportation was one of my questions, and how do you social distance, in the hybrid model, on a school bus, and then from a school lunch standpoint, how to ensure that all the kids are fed, and then what does that do to the budget, right? When we're running an additional route. So that was one of my questions, and we'll wait for Dan to get back. Another one on when there are two cases per school, so that shuts down. That's not per district, right? So that'd be per.
That would be. We would put that school building on
Okay.
distance learning for the 2 weeks.
Got it.
And then come back.
Okay.
They consider 2 or more to be an outbreak,
Okay.
which is why we're looking at it that way. In terms of the school lunch and the transportation piece. So first of all, what I can tell you about the lunch is last spring we were able to feed everyone, and that is not how it's being funded now. The way it's being funded now is we can feed students who are on free and reduced lunch or if they wish to pay. So what we talked about is the fact that if we are, first of all, mostly in a distance learning model, we're not going to be making lunches and serving them. And for those who do want lunches, we will make them a couple of times a week. And it would be like we did last spring, where we serve multiple meals at once. And we're still working on all of the details of food service. For transportation, again, I don't think he's back yet, but the
Yes,
way
I am.
that,
Yeah,
oh,
there's
there we
that.
go. So Dan, speak to food service and transportation. Glad you're back.
Yeah, sorry about that. My computer restarted on me in the middle of that. So with food service, yeah, we're going. Last spring, we were able to feed any child under the age of 18. The federal government reimbursed us for all of those, and we didn't have to keep track of who the student was that wanted the meal. We're going back to the traditional food service program where you're either qualified as free reduced or a paid meal. And we have to record each meal by the student's name. So it's a very traditional model that we've had to use in the past, which works fine while you're in a school setting, a little more difficult in a distance learning center type model. So I'm meeting with Rachel, our food service director, tomorrow to work out some of the details. And I see she's on here tonight, but the initial thought is that we're going to only prepare meals in one location, the high school, because we're not going to be serving in multiple locations. So there's no reason to create a food service program in each building at this particular time. And I'm not sure how this works yet, but students will most likely have to pre-register for meals because we'll have no idea how many to fix or who are they for or all those questions. And then there is the expectation that because with a distance model where students are at home, there may be fewer kids that will be our paying customers because they're not on site to have lunch. So we'll look at how that works. And again, probably food service provided a couple days a week so that there's 2 or 3 days at a time that we provide the meals in advance. We did that last spring. And then the question is, how do we get meals to students? And that's something we don't have an answer for at this time. Are they going to be required to pick them up? Can we provide some type of delivery service? We were able to do that last spring because we were instructed by OSPI to keep people working. So we had our bus drivers who weren't driving kids delivering meals. That leads us into the transportation conversation, which is totally different this year. We will get funded for transportation based upon ridership. And kind of a brief understanding of how that normally works is we count kids that ride the bus every day, and there's 3 times throughout the year that we report a 3-day period, and we pick the 3 highest days that we have, and that's our ridership for the year. They also look at our previous year's expenditures for transportation, and they use the number of students, the number of miles that we drive, and they have a very odd calculation system that's almost a black box that nobody understands. And they dump the stuff into this box, and it comes out with a dollar amount that each district receives based upon ridership and miles. And then they take the lesser of your previous year's expenditures or the amount allocated based on ridership, and that's your funding for that year. Well, as we move into next year, we're going to use our spring count, so roughly 1,200 kids, let's say, riding the bus. They're going to use the fall and winter count in 2020 and 2021. Assuming we're still in a distance model, those numbers would be 0. So they use those numbers and then the previous year's expenditures, and OSPI's calculation would be that we would receive about 50% of what our normal revenue would be. So roughly, instead of $830,000, $415,000 would be the amount that we would receive. And we would receive that basically from September through December. Like enrollment, where we give them a budget and we estimate a number of kids we have, we get a funding through those months. So that the concern that OSPI has, by the time we get to the end of December, we will have received more money than were allocated because of the ridership that we don't have in the next 2 sessions of count. So there would be no more funding from January through August in 2021. So we would receive about 50% of our funding. The bigger problem then really becomes the following year. Because if we talk about how we do the funding model, there will be 2 periods with no ridership, and there'll be 1 period with kids. So that would roughly calculate about 1/3 of what our normal revenue would be, but they also then use the lesser of expenditures. So if we assume that we're not providing transportation in 2021, the lesser of expenditures is going to be less than 1/3 of the revenue costs we normally receive. And here's the problem with that. Fully expect that when we get to a year from now, we're going to provide transportation for all kids. We're going to be back in school, we're going to have that model going, and we will have maybe $200,000 worth of funding a year from now. So it creates that dynamic with transportation. You know, we've asked, as school districts, we've asked the legislatures to change the funding model for transportation because, you know, we can't lose our bus drivers. How are we going to replace them? What happens when we start in January and they have another job? All those scenarios, and their basic response was, we have a budget issue at the state level, and if you're not transporting, we're not going to pay you. So that's kind of the background on the transportation funding that we'll be looking at for the next couple years, actually. So it creates some really heavy issues. What we're looking at starting in September is we may transport a few kids. We have some potential kindergarten students coming in or in person and some special needs kids. That at the very beginning would probably be the extent of who we're transporting because all the other kids are at home doing distance learning and we won't have that capacity. So it creates that dilemma of, you know, what do we do with our transportation department? How do we maintain so we can potentially bring it back up to speed? What do we need come September? Still working on the needs based on what we get from kindergarten registration, what we get from the special needs department as far as what kids need. So that's kind of that awkward place we are right now with transportation.
Thanks, Dan. So to Charlie's question about social distancing, the rules around transportation for social distancing are actually, they indicated that you could put all the students on the bus. We would put a student per seat and start from the back so that they didn't get into each other's breathing space. But right now, in surveying those coming to kindergarten, we have very few, maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 that have indicated they would even want transportation. So it's too soon to call at this point. Other questions?
I had a curiosity on the timing more than anything else. I really like the plan that's been put forward. I think that it's well thought out. I particularly think that it's well thought out for the way we move forward. We push the timeline for getting the plan ready forward based on feedback from the community group. I think that that was very well done. My question is, and this is something I'd look for staff and community involvement in and input on, is would it be useful for teachers and parents to push that first check date from October 15th to the end of the first quarter so that we have a steadier, more set routine to start school so that both teachers and families, teachers, students, and parents know what to expect for that first quarter. So that's just something I'd like to put out there to get input from the community and from my fellow board members and the staff and anyone else who's listening in.
So We have one question, Brooke, on the Q&A. First of all, are all board members present to vote tonight? Yes, they are. Why would you evaluate the week of mid-October instead of mid-September for the first time to see if in-person is a possibility? So this particular person is looking for sooner rather than later. I will let you know that from the opinion that we have, I like your thinking. Certainly to give people more of an opportunity to get settled. You know, I'm going to be looking at it every week and be considering the trend, because we have to make sure that it's going to continue to trend down. So I'm certainly open to waiting until the first quarter, but it would probably be that anyway, because if we looked at it October 15th and set a date for starting, it would be maybe a week or two later. So we're almost to the end of the fourth quarter anyway. But certainly if if the board thinks it should be later, or how, I'm going to go on the trends anyway in terms of my recommendations.
I think you phrased it well, Joe, with your way of saying that the team is going to start looking at what is our next step at October 15th, but that doesn't mean that the next step happens October 16th.
Right.
I think that it's the way the plan is playing out, as you just said, likely the change would be pushed out for a couple of weeks so that families can prepare, everybody can prepare to move forward.
And for our instructional calendar, November 6th is the end of the first quarter. So it's very close.
Thanks, Christy. So we have a couple other questions from the PSE folks. Why don't you know about reductions until school starts? And we're meeting with them tomorrow. But for those who are listening, it's because we don't know what students are attending. We don't have a clear picture on that yet. So we won't know really until we get back into school what we need in terms of our classified staff. We're not clear on it yet, and we really are looking to meet with their representatives tomorrow to have that discussion. So we're not prepared to answer that. It's clear that our high schools will not be returning to school or even to a hybrid situation for several months. What training has been provided to our teachers to make them effective educators in an online setting? Last year, it was evident that they were not only uncomfortable teaching online, but were also ineffective. So we are training our staff. We've been engaging in reimagining education. Our TOSAs have been also getting training, and we have scheduled 3 full days of training for our teaching staff as we open school. Teachers don't work in the summer. They're paid for 12 months work. They work in the summer on their own, certainly. And I know every single one of them has been engaged in their own work around how to improve, knowing what they did then and what they have to do coming fall. We've gotten a lot of feedback from teachers when we surveyed them. So I believe there's been a lot of independent work as well as what we're going to be providing them. So we're going to be on much surer footing in September when we start. And folks will see that. Other board questions?
No, but you have one more, Joe, from about food service.
Okay, so is the board suggesting I go to the Q&A and continue there, or, okay.
We've kind of been going back and forth, I thought, so.
Okay.
I think
So
that's
if the
fine.
question, so if the district is not preparing or delivering breakfast lunches, are there other options with partnerships with other organizations to provide meals? We have a lot of students that depend on free or reduced lunches. We will be working with our families who require free and reduced lunch. The issue is the students who typically pay, we don't anticipate they will be paying. We do have a relationship with a variety of organizations, including Good Cheer. Our Readiness to Learn staff that always is reaching out to our families who have needs. So we anticipate we'll be working together to provide meals. But the district will be providing meals. It just will be, again, different from the past. And we have not zeroed in on what that will look like because we're still a work in progress. It's August 12th, so we have time. Let's see. If we were waiting until 0 cases to return to in-person full time, that may never happen. And with this plan, it is clear our high school students will not be returning to school likely this year at all. What training is being done? How will you keep students active and engaged? I do believe we'll actually get our students to return. And there are plans being developed at the high school for activities and engagement. Again, that is very important to us, that we maintain school spirit and that students have things to look forward to and opportunities to be engaged. As the disease reduces, anticipating that it will, there will be more and more opportunity to come to school. So I don't agree that it may never happen this year at all. But we're going to let the science and the metrics are going to guide what we do, but we do have plans for engaging our students. We have 70 plus that want a form of in-person based on surveys at all levels. So I would hope that if the county continues to be below 25, that the board considers in-person hybrid earlier than later. Would you allow parents to choose one method for fall and then choose a different method of learning in January if they can return to school, so we can provide consistency? We are, of course, open to parents making choices. What we're hoping is that we can be consistent. So if you're deciding that you want 100% online all year, we need some notice if you're going to come back, and vice versa. If you're going to go hybrid, you can always drop back to 100% online learning. What's difficult is as we're going at the beginning, we need to create cohorts of kids. So when the opportunities come up, we want to know from folks, if you want this hybrid opportunity, which I think they will, we're going to be scheduling students. So families there'll be outreach to families as we go forward. You said teachers get paid for 12 months or teachers paid through the summer as money coming out of checks during their contracted 9 months so they can receive money through the summer. It is the latter. Teachers are paid over a 12-month period for their 10 months of work. It's a convenience. It's not they get paid for 12 months. They get paid over 12 months. Will parents know what the curriculum looks like? How much online, how much on paper? I believe parents are still considering their options of traditional homeschool curriculum versus distance learning provided by the district. Learning and teaching flexibility is a huge consideration for parents that will still be working but also want to do online learning. Yes, you will know more about the curriculum as we go forward. Absolutely. Brooke would like to answer this question live. Brooke, did you put? No. Okay. So we took care of that in terms of reductions.
So do we have any more questions from the board before we move to open board position update? I want to thank Brooke for his time in representing the school board on this very, very important issue, because I know you've been deeply involved in this, and I thought the plan that you've laid out, Joe, is really strong and solid. I read something on a post from Facebook that I want to read to everybody, and it says, a school superintendent said something profound in his address recently where he announced the cancellation of school for the next 3 weeks in his district. And he said, in the end, it'll be impossible to know if we overreacted or did too much. But it will be quite apparent if we underreacted and did too little. And I think your plan is a really solid one, and it addresses absolutely the health concerns of our students and our staff and our community, and I commend you for the work you've done. I believe we have one more comment in here, and then we're going to move to our next thing. So Joe, do you see that comment?
Oh, you mentioned parents will know the curriculum. Can you give a timeline so parents can make a proper decision? Yeah, we'll be putting out more information over the coming weeks. I don't have an exact date, but we will certainly be getting information out to our families.
You know, none of these decisions are easy.
No, but I would suggest to that one particular attendee, certainly if they reach out to the principal of the school that they anticipated their child would be attending, that principal has more information and would be happy to share. I don't want to misrepresent what we're doing, so I would contact the principal directly.
Thank you. Okay, let's go on then to our update on open board position effective September 1, and that is to take my seat.
Yeah. So I wanted to make sure the board had an opportunity to talk about process. We advertised the position. We currently have 2 applicants. They're waiting on the next steps for them, and I'm waiting to know whether the board wants to continue recruiting, or if you want to, for example, at the next meeting, the way the process typically works is that the board interviews the individuals in public and then meets in executive session to talk about qualifications, and then returns to public and takes a vote. And obviously Julie would, if you do it next meeting, Julie will be there, but she would not be a voting member. It's the 4 remaining board members who would vote. So rather than, you know, we need to have an open conversation so the board can direct the superintendent as to what you'd like to do, and then we can plan for it for you.
Joe, I didn't review that policy again, but I'm curious if from years past, how long do we leave the position open or advertise for that as an open position?
Well, you've typically advertised for 30 days, but you have 90 days from the date of vacancy to actually fill the position. So you have a lot of time. You have a full board until September 1st. So that's when the clock starts for the 90-day requirement to fill that seat.
And Julie, may you be persuaded to extend yourself again for another 30 days.
Damien, I really can't do that. My workload right now is enormous, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So as much as, and I think it's time for somebody else to step up to the plate. It's time for me to pass the baton and let another community member bring in a different viewpoint. This has been a fabulous experience. I am leaving with a complete sense of satisfaction about the remaining board members and the support for the superintendent and the way the district's being run. And you're in great hands right now. And adding a different board member is going to bring in a great dimension for you. So I support that. But thank you, Damien.
No, thank you, Julie. And just know that I will continue to encourage you to stay until there's no more time left on that leaving clock. Because we all know you never know unless you ask. So I appreciate you being here, and I hate to see you go. And I'm sure we all hate to see you go. So any words of encouragement that we can give Julie to lighten her workload, that would be great. But I understand we can't necessarily do that, but it would be great if you could stay.
I think it would be very valuable to get Julie's input on the 2 applicants. So I think it would be very valuable to get them in at the next meeting.
Yeah.
So we have 2 weeks between now and then. Do you want to continue to advertise?
Yes,
Yes. So you'll continue to accept applications.
that's my opinion.
I would agree with Brooke.
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
close
Christy-
it a couple of days before, Joe, or whenever. But yeah, go as long as you can.
Okay. Good, that's good direction. Obviously it's the questions that you will ask, we have some standard questions and I will send those to board members in advance. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that we will continue to advertise and accept applications until the day before you will interview. And we will set up those interviews and they will happen via Zoom and prior to or at 6:30. How would you like to do it at the next meeting?
Didn't we in the past do it prior to?
You did it prior to, and then you had an executive session prior to the meeting, and then you selected the member when you opened the meeting. And then they were sworn in at the next meeting.
I would think that school reopening and what we're dealing with COVID is going to take some additional time for the next board meeting. And so I'm going to suggest to the board that you have a 5:30 start time if everybody's available to do that. I don't know, Andrea, are you?
Yeah, I can make that happen.
Okay. Does that sound okay, Joe?
That's fine. Yeah,
Could-
so we'll
could
schedule. Go ahead,
Could I
Jamie.
change that just a hair, Julie, and make it more like, so in other words, do we want to go 30 minutes with each person for an interview? If we have 2 people, that would be an hour. Are we looking at 20 minutes for 3 for an hour? And then a little bit of time for us, like we've done in the past, to discuss the qualifications before we come out and vote. So wouldn't it be maybe closer to a 5 o'clock start?
I cannot do earlier than a 5 o'clock start.
So you can do a 5?
I could do a 5, but that's as early as I can go.
I would suggest then that we do 5, but I'm also going to suggest that you not have a 30-minute interview.
Yeah, you typically did 15 when you did this in the past. I mean, sometimes you may need more, but because remember, the individual sends their bio ahead of time and they answer some questions ahead of time. It's up to you, though. We can start at 5. Again, if you only have 2 candidates, it gives you plenty of time. If you have 3 or 4, it still gives you a good amount of time.
Well, I'm good with whatever you decide. I think we're just trying to say if you got a couple more that we would need more time. I think that's basically the
Right.
So we can all make it at 5. Why don't we say plan for 10-minute executive session and 20-minute interviews, however, based on how many we actually get?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's fine. Yeah, we can do that, and we'll start you at 5. And so I'm hearing continue to advertise, cutoff date a day or 2 before, start the meeting at 5. There you have it.
And I can book the interviews backwards so that if it turns out that I just need to know how much executive time you want. If you just want a half an hour, executive would start at 6 o'clock. And so then the first interview before that would be like at 5:40. And then the one before that would be at 5:20 and then, go backwards.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think 30 minutes exactly is plenty. Don't you think?
Agreed.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. Now we have a game plan. I appreciate that.
Okay, folks, let's move on to our equity policy review.
Real quick, Julie, there's a question in the Q&A regarding the board member applications that might be helpful for us to answer.
Have we been reaching out to people of color to fill the position? We have been reaching out far and wide. I did reach out to folks at trainings that I've been to on race and equity, and we put it out there. So, and there were people of color participating. So yes, we have been.
Yes.
Okay, let's go on with our equity and inclusion policy.
All right. So this policy went to the equity committee and they went through and added some comments and pieces to the equity. Christy, I'm looking at this on the Google Doc. Is the policy on the board docs, does that include the recommendations from the equity committee, or should I capture those kind of in this?
Yeah, no, I didn't put those, I didn't put that one up because,
Okay.
but I can pull that up right now if you guys want to look at that one.
No, I think if you leave the one that's up, I can summarize it pretty quickly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
the comments, we don't really want to identify who made what comment.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
Google Doc would do that, so.
So in terms of changes that we adjusted, we added a couple categories to the first paragraph, including gender and sexual orientation to there. We are also recognizing that systemic inequities are happening in schools across the nation rather than just specific to our school district. I'll come back to the second paragraph once I've kind of summarized just the encapsulation of it. There's some language changes around training to raise awareness and identifying and addressing microaggressions with culturally responsive methods, so focusing more on action-based. And then there were sections that were pulled out as suggestions, Joe, for you to follow up with procedures. So ways that we might recognize, response, or track situations that create micro or macroaggressions. Looking at systems for identifying would be procedural. And then also, Christy, you found one other one.
One of the things that this is the original equity policy, so it doesn't have any of the changes from the equity team. Do you want me to pull that one up?
No, because it has the comments that identify the people and we don't have their permission to identify them.
Okay.
So that's why I'm looking at the Google Doc capturing the changes for the conversation.
Good.
So
Okay.
we can also just be respectful of other people's. But
Yeah.
Christy, you had mentioned stakeholders, under the stakeholders, that we have a procedure for ways that we invite people to participate in different districts' decision making and ensuring that we have representation across that. Those were, for the most part, the changes. I think that the parts that the team pulled out as like, these are procedures, Joe, I think that they're a great place for you to start with district leadership team. I do think that there is some need for the how. Questions like, how do you track instances of microaggressions, or how do we track some of these things? So I want to just be transparent for the public that some of these pieces are going to take other thought partners coming to the table. And some of them are also just going to take time to establish a how, but that I don't want that to be construed as though it's not an area of focus, because I know that it is. One part that kind of came up across the equity team, Christy, if you scroll up to the first page of the policy, it's the second paragraph. And one thing that we want to think about when we write policies is that when you're looking at a policy, you usually go to it when you're referencing for a situation. So like, you're thinking like, I want to do X, Y, and Z. I need to check the policy to make sure my plan stays in alignment with the policy. So we want them to be condensed, but very dense. Like we don't want them to be multiple pages long because people will stop reading. But we want the words that we do choose to hold weight and to hold power within them. So for the second paragraph, what I had included initially was just, for the purposes of this document, diversity describes, and then we list what we mean by diversity. And I think that some people wanted to see this embedded in multiple areas. And this was part of where I pushed back against some of the comments, because I think if we take that whole paragraph and include all of those continuums of people's ways of being, and insert it across the pages, I think that the words will lose their power because there will be too many. So that was just one area I wanted to clarify. The other piece that I wanted to just make sure that I voiced was, as we're writing this policy, using person first language, and making sure that we're identifying people as people who have different aspects to them versus labeling them with whatever ism they have, right? So if we're talking about homelessness, we would phrase that as students who experience homelessness rather than homeless students. And so those were some places where I tried to catch those. In terms of getting voices to the table on this, I did, I will say that I did it recently. So I'm hoping to hear back in the next few days. I did reach out to Erin Jones, as we had talked about, to see if she had capacity to help support us with this. I have not heard back from her, but that was also, she's well within a responsible amount of reply window times. We also reached out to Caprice, who led some of our district trainings recently. She responded and said that she did not currently have capacity to be a thought partner with us on this, but she did give us a list of some other names that we can reach out to help get voices at the table. I would say currently we do not have very many voices of color looking at this policy and providing feedback. So that would be hugely beneficial to us putting out a good first attempt with this. We know that policies can always be rewritten. We can always come back to them. But I do just want to call it out that we are struggling to get diverse stakeholders to the table. And so we have 37 attendees currently watching this. And so this is its second reading. It goes for third reading at the next meeting. So please give us your suggestions. You can find the policy in board docs with the agenda, which is attached to the email with the navigator that Christy sends out. And you can reach out to myself, you can reach out to Dr. Moshe, you can reach out to any members of the board and just let us know what your feedback is and how we can capture and include it.
Mm-hmm.
We see Q&A coming in. So I can go ahead and answer this one, Joe. A participant asked if we have consulted with local tribes in order to include their perspective and to possibly include land use acknowledgement. We have not, but if you email me some contacts or people who might be people who would know who I should be talking to, I would be happy to reach out.
We have information on that I can share with you as well.
Sweet.
Yep.
Do we have comments from the board about this work, important work? Well, let me say I really appreciate what you've done, Andrea, to represent the board, as Brooke did with the other important work, very pressing thing, and now this, and it's great. I read through that policy, and I think it's very, very well done, and I know you've been involved in this for quite a long time, so it's nice to have your expertise. And Joe, thank you for bringing the community and your staff together to make this happen. It all started with that letter that you wrote, and it's great.
Yeah.
Okay. We do have another comment in the question. It's comment and a question. Thank you. The policy looks excellent so far. And another thank you for the Black Lives Matter sign. It's wonderful. While I hope we are working towards an ethnic studies class, we are working towards an ethnic studies class. In the meantime, is there any change to start in the curriculum? We certainly are looking at our curriculum through an equity lens, and we're moving forward with that. I've been in conversations. As a matter of fact, they're part of our equity team. Certainly in social studies, moving forward with changes there. Again, I recognize how really important this work is, and I have been focused on reopening schools, so I have not provided as much attention to this as is needed. But hopefully we'll have a plan tonight and we'll get our school year started, and my focus and energy can go toward this. And a question about the vote. The board is planning to vote tonight on our reopening plan. It is on the agenda as a vote to be taken.
And so we shall do so.
And I just want to note that that is in direct response to community feedback during that committee that we had, where the community wanted to hear the plan and have a set plan as soon as possible. And that's why
Thank
we're
you,
voting.
Brooke. Yep.
And the one thing we do know, Brooke, is it's going to change.
Yes.
It's going to change. So, you know, we can have a
So,
and do the
Again, it's
absolute very best.
based on science and the metrics and the disease. It will change.
so can I just share that so in one of my other hats, I've been working on school reopening plans, and I had a plan ready to go to a different board. And we got the message that the 3 o'clock press conference was happening, and I had a mini panic attack. The 3 o'clock press conference happened, and we had to readdress, but not as much. But we really cannot stress enough how fast things are changing, and the amazing work that Dr. Moshe and the entire leadership team have been doing as they continue to rise and pivot and rise and pivot. It's at a huge amount of change at an incredible pace.
These are turbulent times that we're in right now, and we can't predict what it's going to be. All we can do is be nimble and protect our students and our staff and our community and do the very best, and I know you're doing so. With that, then, if there are no further comments, I'm going to close our workshop and adjourn the workshop and call for a special business meeting. So I would call the special business meeting to order now. We have 2 action items on the agenda. The first one, memorandum 19/20-56, approval of resolution 654 district reopening plan that we just reviewed. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve resolution 654, the district reopening plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to just highlight the fact that Joe mentioned earlier during the workshop about risk management. And for those in the audience that may not quite understand what we're talking about with risk management, it's our own insurance policy. And so some of the information, and Joe, you can chime in if you like and take over, but some of the information we received pertaining to our risk is that if somebody comes down with COVID, we may not be protected as school board members from liability, especially if somebody passes away or something along those lines. And so we have to follow our own public health guidelines on this issue. And so that's really important, I think, for all of us to understand that that's why Joe's work is so involved and so detailed in the way this plan is reopening, and so many little variables apply, is because it really boils down to following our public health guidelines to assure that we are covered under risk management. So I think that's really important for everybody to understand that. Thank you, Joe, for your efforts in that, and especially bringing to light the details that we are facing with risk management as it pertains to COVID-19. Thank you.
I think I would also just say, Joe, you know, in addition to that, I can see how this plan was developed with students' interest in mind, and that this is a plan that first and foremost does our absolute best attempt at keeping children safe and keeping staff members safe. And I think that it's prudent, and it is well within the guidelines and what we understand that we need to do to keep people safe. And I want to commend you for that. And I want to commend the team for building this and presenting it so concisely and in such an easy to understand manner.
I agree 100% with what Andrea said. And I'm very impressed with this. Like one of the commenters said, it's a very thorough plan, very well thought out, puts the focus where it needs to be on. And I also want to thank the community for chiming in, both here in the Q&A session during this workshop. I find these workshops very valuable for getting community input, and also beforehand via email and during the community committee. So thank you to the community for chiming in, as well as the administration for putting this together.
Yeah, Joe, and I can't agree more. I mean, you've done a really good job here. And I think as leaders of the district, you know, our number one goal is the safety of the, you know, the students and the staff, the teachers, and everyone involved. I think this really addresses that. So this is a well thought out plan. And I appreciate all the hard work that went into it.
Any further comments? Okay, we have a motion to approve and a second. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried, unanimous. Okay, do we have a motion for memorandum 19/20-57, approval of resolution 655, suspension of policies in emergencies?
So I would just comment before you continue that this resolution is similar to the one you passed in the spring. Once again, it is not the superintendent's intention to do anything without the board, but should the situation warrant it in terms of an emergency, it gives us the opportunity to take care of things. So just wanted to let you know that.
Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay. Any last words from the board before we adjourn?
You know what mine would be, Julie.
I'd like to say thank you to so many people for coming out and
I was
joining
just
us for the workshop.
That was great.
It's wonderful
We
seeing
hope that
40
we
plus
were
people.
able to answer some questions to allay everybody's fears and you know, let you know that we've got your kids' best interest and doing the very best we can to keep them educated, but most importantly to keep them safe. We don't want to become another high school like the one in Georgia. I mean,
Well,
what a mess.
yeah, and I really appreciate the board's support and work in this very difficult environment. Yeah, we put a lot of work into this plan, and there's still much to be done. But I really appreciate the support of the board. So it gives us a roadmap now.
You know, one other thing, Joe, that might be good here in the day of social media is if we could have some sort of advertisement for the open board position that we as board members and those in the community audience and so forth could help share and spread the word. So rather than just maybe being advertised on our own website or in the paper, that we could hit a lot more people through sharing on social media.
So I will have Christy send that to you. She's shared it in the Navigator and it's been on Facebook, but if it would be great, we'll put it up again and you can share it on your own social media.
So yeah, it's been shared on social media, on Facebook. It's out there. It's been a few times it's been posted, but also we did publish it in the newspaper as well. So it was in the South Woodley Record, mostly the end of June and first week of July, because we thought we were going to be doing it sooner than we are now.
Thank you, Christy. I was just referring to the fact that we're extending it and it's open still and
Okay.
to be able to get it out again.
You want to get another advertisement out? Okay. To extend it. Okay.
Any last comments for the good of the cause? All right, everybody, stay safe, be healthy, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.